So let's just take a moment and review what a career progression looks like. We start with planning. And that's where we're developing the organizational structure and identifying what skill sets and quantity of skills we need. We then hire to fill those positions. We then should provide orientation training, qualifications, and then perform and maintain the skills that are required within that job description, and then provide upskilling and professional development. Now you see this arrow moving back to new position into the hire box. So as we professionally develop individuals or technically develop individuals, they may become qualified for a different position. So we want to have a path for them to be hired into that new position, get whatever needed orientation, qualification, etc. So as they go through. So when we talk about planning, it starts with objectives, and we talk about the job task analysis, position descriptions, determining the staffing level in the organizational structure. When we hire, we want to hire based on position descriptions. We want to know what the qualifications and whatever laws and regulations need to be complied with in the hiring process. We then need to instill with this organization, with this person, the organizational policies. They need to learn physical locations, emergency egress, what's the chain of command, who do they report to, etc. Then in terms of qualification, we need to assess them. We need to provide training and coaching so that we can fulfill the position description. Then we go into perform and maintain skills. Here's where the training plan for that position comes into play. We want to have the required training and skills maintenance. So there could be things like if you're an I&E person or an electrician that needs to be certified in Allen Bradley systems, for instance. We want to be able to make sure that there are annual training requirements are fulfilled. Things like CPR training for electricians, etc. Then on the professional development side, that should be based on having a personal strategic plan. Everybody should have a strategic plan, your own personal mission, vision, values, and objectives. That should be discussed with the person that you report to so that they understand where you're trying to get to in the next 5 or 10 years. So it could be in a technical path, or it could be in a managerial leadership type path. But whatever it is, that should be shared with the person you report to so that they can help you, give you the training and the coaching that you need to achieve it. And of course, at the end of employment, you do want to do exit interviews and so forth to capture whatever you can as in terms of knowledge and capability from that individual. So when we talk about aligning personal goals and career paths, the development of personnel plays a crucial role in improving organizational performance. We want to align staff with the strategic plan. We want to establish career paths for individual employees. They should see downstream where they can get to if they check all the right blocks. The objective is not only to train your staff, but also to develop them. Training results in the attainment of knowledge and skills. Development is closing the capability gaps between what is required of a position and to prepare people for future positions. We want to align personal goals with those career paths. Leaders must know their personnel and to put them in a position to succeed. This is why we have things like span of control. So a particular supervisor, for instance, shouldn't be supervising more than about 8 to 12 people. If you get much more than a 1 to 12 span of control, it's very difficult to get to know your people and to provide the adequate amount of coaching that they need and support that they need to be able to develop. Leaders must also know their own goals and put themselves in a position to succeed. So while I'm talking about how a leader develops their own personnel, they should also think about their own leadership development or their own development into the same sorts of things. Where do they want to be in 5 or 10 years? Put together that strategic plan. So now let's move on to develop continuous job-specific strategic training programs. So let's first stipulate that everyone has strengths and weaknesses in their knowledge and skills. Leaders should leverage the strengths and identify and improve weaknesses. One-size-fits-all training is okay for broad topics on things like cultural and workplace norms. However, it tends to, one-size-fits-all type training or generic training tends to standardize general practices by requiring conformance with those norms. On the other hand, individual development emphasizes the unique character of individuals. Individual development plans should be aligned with their career goals and career paths. What does the person need to be fully capable in their current position? What future positions does this person aspire to? Leaders must identify the gaps and provide training, coaching, and experiences to close those gaps. So here's just another way to represent the process of putting a training plan together. So in the center, you have the training plan itself. The things that go into developing that training plan refer to each individual person's qualification gaps, their maintained knowledge and skills gaps, and the upskill and professional development desires of the individual. So those all feed into the training plan. The training plan also has to get resources. There has to be labor available to provide the training and coaching opportunities. And there might also be a need, there will likely be a need for funding to have a training budget. On the bottom of the circle, some of the things that can be used to satisfy the training plan are on-the-job training, job rotation, so introducing somebody to a new skill by putting them in the position, online training or live in-person training. Those are ways to satisfy the training plan. As the training plan is executed, we want to be able to evaluate performance, and that feeds back into the qualification gaps, maintain knowledge and skills, and upskill and performance development. So how do you build a training plan? There's many different ways to do it. This is just a simple example. We could look at each employee should be scheduled for someplace around 80 to 100 hours of training per year. And the average for employee training budget should be someplace around $2,500 or $3,000 per year in the US. So what you would normally do is in one column, you would write down the name of the person. You would put down what the training topics are across the top. And then you'd have a coding system, something like QG, meaning qualification gap. This would be the highest priority training. MS would be maintain knowledge and skills, and this would be sort of a medium priority. And then upskilling or professional development would be UP, and this might have a couple of different connotations to it, and you know obviously you could put different coding systems on this. But a medium priority would be if you're preparing for promotion. A low priority might be if it's not related to anything important, it's just something that this individual wants to get on their training plan. So those are, you know, just sort of a simplistic way to build a training plan. Now let's move on to cross-functional training. So this is training that applies to all personnel, and these are things like administrative procedures, safety, health, and environment, anti-discrimination, diversity and inclusion, organization or sub-organizations, mission, vision, values, and objectives. Training that provides cross-functional information. So operations persons, perhaps learning about basic condition monitoring or lubrication, you know, that might set them up for operator perform maintenance. Maintenance persons learning about system feed rates or quality or production schedule guidelines, so that makes them more effective in how they work with the operations personnel. Procurement people learning about reliability impacts on poor quality parts, standardization of equipment and parts. And then storeroom personnel learning about part quality as well, on their impacts on reliability, how they maintain parts that are in storage, how they orient them, how they keep the environment clean, dust-free, dry. Cross-functional training improves communication, teamwork, and morale. So people gain an understanding and they gain more respect for people in the other functions. Decisions get made with the organization's best interest in mind. So now let's move on to hiring well. The best first step is to hire the right people. But there's problems in hiring the right people. There may not be enough fully qualified people available at the compensation that you can offer. HR now is under pressure to hire a warm body, expecting that once they get on board, that your department will give them on-the-job training. Maintenance and reliability managers may not have been given a budget to train or the labor available, and may not have the labor available to train people. Hiring general or unskilled handymen diminishes the pool of skilled craftspersons. So you might have worked very hard to get your reliability up, and now you're having people that don't have the background in precision maintenance that are now out in the field and now doing work on those same pieces of equipment. That puts a much higher burden on the organization to make sure that those people get trained, or that they have oversight to make sure they are trained on how to do the job properly. Safety, health, environment, and reliability will likely be degraded. If you can't hire highly knowledgeable and skilled persons, look for candidates that are motivated to learn. Plan to assess their gaps, implement a development plan, and follow through on that plan. Make sure that new hires understand how they fit in and where you need them to develop. Now, engaging the team. We want to leverage the knowledge of your team. So develop your team members, develop your employees to see opportunities. Encourage them to identify proactive improvements. What does your team need? They need training, they need tools, and they need encouragement. Management support to allocate time for development. So making sure that you allocate the time for their training and their coaching. Improve output, quality, and morale. When you're engaging your people, your team members, requiring people to apply what they learned from training and development. Create and update development plans at least annually. Help people envision career advancement opportunities. Technical, professional, or even managerial. Invest in your team with coaching and training to get them where they want to go. So what are the set of tools and processes? You've probably heard of employee performance reviews. We want to link those with performance expectations. They also want to review goals, identify gaps, and adjust training and development plans. Skills assessment. So this should be relative to their position description. Sometimes we ask people to do things that are outside of their position description, but what they're hired for, what their position description is, that's what we need to assess their skills against. We should then focus training and development on their gaps. We should encourage and motivate. We want to educate them on the reasons why development is important. They're able to contribute to the organization at a higher level. They are more valuable to the organization. We want to increase readiness to learn and develop. And there should be customized training. One size does not fit all. Remember, we said it's good for general overall training, but it's not great for professional development or technical development. So the content, how people are coached, on-the-job training, and repetition, those are the things that are going to help them to learn quickly and let those learning opportunities stay with them. Communicate expectations. Apply training. Support will be provided. Conduct audits. Observations to confirm that things are being done the correct way. Theory and practical application. Don't just train on theory. Apply training to real situations. The more you do it, the more it gets ingrained, the more confidence you have doing it. Training, coaching, and audit resources. The trainee, the trainer, and coaching hours. When we're developing our plans and identifying how much time is available, we want to be able to lay out the percentages of time that's required for people to be trained and the hours of coworkers providing coaching. So those are hours that should be captured in your CMMS. Time for the trainee to gain proficiency. So don't expect them to be perfect out of the box, but expect that they're going to get proficient over time. And we want to be adjusting task hours and equipment and things like that, so that as our team gets more proficient, we might be able to do a job task quicker. So we might be able to reduce the time allocated to certain activities. Okay, so leading and managing people. One of the things I wanted to say is that, within this pillar, I feel like there needs to be a little bit more meat on what is exactly captured within this body of knowledge. So I'm going to go, I've to this point been very close to the script on the body of knowledge, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper, given the time available for this webinar, to present a couple of other thoughts and ideas that should help you within this organization and leadership pillar. So the first thing on leading and managing people, leaders must motivate, inspire, encourage their teams. Managers are responsible for hiring, firing, disciplining, evaluating, and developing their team. So there are leadership responsibilities, and there's maintenance and reliability leaders specific things. So what I'd first like to say is that leadership requires much more than just leadership skills. We often talk about getting leadership training, and we're basically talking about leadership skills, which are just things like time management, communication, empowering or delegating, conflict management, giving and receiving feedback. Those are important skills, but those skills alone are not sufficient. Leaders need to be able to identify the direction and the requirements that they have. They need to want to be a leader. They need to know leadership roles, attributes, and skills. And when I talk about roles and attributes and skills, roles are the places where a leader allocates their time. So there's 5 of those. There's being an expert or a technician in their field. There's being an administrator, manager. There's coaching, there's systems thinking, and there's visionary. With attributes, there are attributes that every leader should exude. And that's to be consistent, attentive, motivational, respectful, and assertive. And the skills I just mentioned a few minutes ago. Leaders also need to know and develop and properly use their sources of power, their position power and their personal power. And leaders also need to know how to influence others. That's mostly about being trustworthy, but also knowing something about needs and motivations of the people that you lead. And they also need to know how to set goals and how to drive their team towards that goal, how to motivate them towards that goal. So mission, vision, values, and objectives are the direction that a leader is provided with. And then guidance and assets are the requirements that a productive leader is provided with. So having those 4 black boxes provides the stability that a leader needs. And then all of those light blue boxes, the things that I just mentioned, are the things that an individual leader needs to be able to do. So leadership responsibilities, we need to communicate mission, vision, values, and strategy. We need to review and update the direction keeping it aligned with the organizational needs of employees and customers. We want to make sure that the team understands its role in executing the mission, vision, values, and strategy. And you can't lead from behind a desk. Set aside some time to walk the plant, see what's happening, and more importantly, be seen. Let people see you seeing them working hard. Effective leaders set the example for norms and performance standards. Walk the talk. Don't just tell folks what they need to do. If the norm is to be to work on time, you be to work on time. Be accountable to create a positive and effective workplace culture. Empower others at the lowest level possible. That means delegating responsibility. Empowered people feel more ownership, and it frees the leader to work on other things, higher level objectives. Maintenance and reliability leaders in particular are accountable for knowing and applying reliability best practices, working to improve reliability and availability while reducing risk and total cost. Accountable to educate others and reinforce the maintenance and reliability best practices. You want to provide training and tools to perform safely and effectively. So some of the tools that we often think of are root cause failure analysis, planning and scheduling, KPIs and metrics. Encouraging the CMRP, CMRT, and CAMA certifications. CMMS, making sure that there's accurate data being collected. And things like condition monitoring and predictive maintenance. So some other tools, what's called precursor tools, the maintenance and reliability direction and requirements. The operational framework tools, so the standards management systems like ISO 55000. Your ability to communicate responsibility and accountability. Using flowcharts, RASI tables, and standard operating procedures. Being able to communicate that accountability cannot be delegated. When a leader is accountable for something, you cannot delegate that accountability. You can delegate responsibility. So if you make somebody responsible for something that you're accountable for and that person does a good job, they get the credit. If there's a problem, you still own the accountability. That's what leaders get paid for. On the process side, we want to set direction, communicate, and maintain. So that means incorporating stakeholder points of view into direction and goals. We also want to develop workflow procedures. So our core management process, our work management process. We want to identify, prioritize, plan, schedule, execute, close out, and provide feedback. Remember, it's a double-edged sword. Whatever we say we're going to do and we authorize as a procedure, we have to stand by it. So that means providing the tools that are needed, the resources that are needed, funding, whatever is required. Once we authorize that procedure, we have to stand behind it. Information storage procedures. So how do we categorize and archive data for analysis? We want to have processes for what to archive and how we want to archive it so that we'll be able to go back and look at that information. Now, there's another way I would like for you to think about when you're talking about the organizational structure and how accountability should be filtering down through the organization. This is what I call the organizational reliability model, and it defines and assigns accountability for critical categories of activities across each leadership level. So at the bottom set of circles, you'll see control and stability. Control and stability is the subordinate or the lower person when I think about each level of leadership. The lower person that reports to the senior person, the subordinate persons are accountable for executing current requirements and communicating deficiencies. On the top half of the model, this is proactive improvement. This is where the senior person at that leadership level, they're establishing requirements, so they are accountable to assess, define, authorize, and implement new requirements. And they're also accountable to take that feedback from the control and stability, the subordinate person, when they identify deficiencies, or when there's any other reason from a strength, weakness, opportunity, or threat to modify current requirements. So that senior person is also accountable to assess, define, authorize, and change current requirements. The reason I say this works across each leadership level, that it's a senior to subordinate person responsibility or orientation. So on the top, you have the plant manager to their department heads or their department managers. Each department manager then is the senior person to their assistant manager. That assistant manager may have supervisors under them. So the assistant manager becomes the senior person to the supervisor. The supervisor then is also the senior person to their team member. So these categories of accountability apply all the way across. It's a linked set of accountabilities across each leadership level. And I know we're getting a little short on time here, so one other thing I wanted to leave you with is when I talk about the individual leader and people wanting to be, they have to want to be a leader. This is a quote that I came across several years ago, but I think it's very apropos. The boss drives people, the leader coaches them. The boss depends on authority, the leader on goodwill. The boss inspires fear, the leader inspires enthusiasm. The boss says I, the leader says we. The boss fixes the blame for a breakdown, the leader fixes the breakdown. The boss says go, the leader says let's go. So what we discussed today is why organization and leadership are important. We discussed determining organizational requirements, analyzing organizational capability, and developing organizational structure, developing personnel, and leading and managing people.